Hello guys, welcome to Video Game Genie. Guys, we all are excited about PlayStation 5 and its new controller design, DualSense. As we saw in the recent PlayStation 5 conference, the DualSense controller will incorporate a variety of new features including haptic feedback, improved trigger buttons, a built-in mic, and a mysterious create button. But this is not something new for us, as we know PlayStation always comes up with unique designs or features in their controllers. So I'm not going to tell you what you already know, but instead I'm going to talk about 5 forgotten controllers which were introduced for Sony PlayStation consoles. So let's get started. For PlayStation 4, Hori came up with a controller that was specifically designed for young gamers, and the design reduced 40% of the controller size, which made it lighter and easier to hold for young gamers. It was a wired controller and didn't have an audio jack. For those who don't know about Hori, it is one of those manufacturers that are famous for building third-party controllers and have made a number of great designs for PlayStation consoles before. But this PlayStation mini gamepad went in some wrong direction, as the major problems with the controller was with its material used for buttons and D-pads, which made button a bit stiffer as compared to original PlayStation 4 controller. Also, there was some gripping issue with the analog sticks, as the cover material over the analog was not the same as the original controller. A proper touchpad was absent in the controller, however they came up with some alteration for the touchpad functionality which was too tough to understand through the manual. One of the biggest drawbacks of the controller was that it is compatible with most of the PS4 games, but not with all of them. Hori Pocket Controller and Pocket Analog Controller were two compact designs done by Hori for PlayStation 1 which can also be used for PlayStation 2 console. Pocket Controller did not have analog sticks as it was completely a digital controller, while the Pocket Analog Controller had analog sticks and could also be switched from analog to digital controller, just like DualShock. Also, if you see DualShock, it uses analog sticks, but in Pocket Analog Controller they have used knobs instead of analog. Even their D-pad is inspired by Nintendo controllers. But the controller were really tiny and there was no issue with the gripping or button material quality. These controllers had a bit faster response than the original PlayStation controller. That is why gamers usually prefer Hori controller for games like Metal Slug and Taken and all those games where you need to react quickly. The main drawback of the controllers were their L1, L2, R1, R2 button position were weird and tough to control, and the wire size was just around 3 feet, which are very shorter as compared to original controllers. Namco neGcon PlayStation controller was one of the unique designs we have ever seen. It was specifically designed for racing games or games where driving is the most important part. Namco designed it for their racing games like Ridge Racer, but it could be used in any other PlayStation racing game. This controller have a better hold, control and precision to simulate the driving in racing games. It came with a twisting functionality at the center part which act as a regulator for your D-pad functions. Twisting it at specific angles and direction provide you a specific angle at which player wants to turn the vehicle. That means the more you twist or rotate the controller in one direction will let you take the sharp turn, while on twisting less in the same direction will let you take the overturn. So basically you can take whatever type of turn you want to take, like underturn, overturn or something in between them, by simply twisting it in clockwise direction or anti-clockwise direction. Not just this, neGcon had Roman number 1, Roman number 2, A, B keys instead of cross, square, triangle and circle key. And the L key, Roman 1 and Roman 2 keys were a bit longer in size and were the trigger keys. And back in those days, we didn't have R2 and L2 as triggers in the DualShock controller. So with this key, a player could control the speed as per their requirement, whether they want to go slow, fast or something in between. The major drawback of the controller was that it was designed for very limited games and also it only had R and L button instead of R1, R2, L1, L2. Instead of having select and start button, they just had one start button and controller was also missing analog sticks. PlayStation Analog Joystick was designed by Sony itself in 1996 prior to Dual Analog and DualShock controller. It was the first analog controller designed by PlayStation and it came even before N64 controller and was inspired by Sega arcade game control system but for home consoles, not for arcade machines. But in mid-90s, All the first-person shooter games had a soft locking system for enemy targets. This was in place because the player could not move in different direction holding the gun and simultaneously change the gun's direction for desired targeting. Even in games where player had to fly or drive some vehicle and simultaneously shoot in variable directions, both the things were something which could not be done with the help of original PlayStation controller. And that is why they had to use soft locking facility in the games. But with the PlayStation Analog controller, a player could easily control the character or vehicle movement with one joystick and gun direction with another joystick. Analog joystick had all the buttons attached to the joystick and also one extra replica on the board part, which actually was very helpful in games like Tekken 3, and most of the gamers prefer arcade style controls for Tekken 3. PlayStation listed a number of games whose experience can be enhanced with analog joystick, but it does not mean that you cannot use this controller with other games. It can be used on any other PlayStation games. Before we move to the number 1, here are some honorable mentions. PlayStation Move Motion Controller for PlayStation 3. PlayStation 3 controller concept from E3 2005. Sony PlayStation Dual Analog Controller, which was predecessor of DualShock controller, was a really great design but was discontinued by PlayStation after the release of DualShock, as both were somewhat identical. For providing a better hold on controller, the holding part of the controller was designed a bit longer as compared to original and DualShock controller. Even the analog stick were made up of plastic material and had a concave surface instead of rubber material convex surface like DualShock. So yes guys, DualShock 4 is not the first Sony PlayStation controller which has concave analog sticks. They had designed the same thing back in mid-90s. To keep the price low, the vibration system was removed from the dual analog controller, which they reintroduced in DualShock. Same as DualShock, dual analog controller had a button to switch between analog and digital mode. But in dual analog, you can also switch to analog joystick controller mode, which they removed in DualShock. The R2 and L2 button also had supporting pillars for fingers. Overall, it could have been a great controller and substitute for DualShock if it was not discontinued. That is it from my side. Do hit the like button and share the video with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon for upcoming video notification. See you soon in my next video.